I want to talk to you a little bit today. This is Rodney Ham, your lobby-free candidate for governor here in the state of Ohio, trying to enlighten people on some of the things that I've seen, especially when it comes to federal programs like the Drug Task Force and its operations in Montgomery County, especially at a motel that I was associated with, and some of the nastiness that goes on behind the scenes nobody knows about. But first, the U.S. Patriot Act broadly expands law enforcement, surveillance, and investigative powers and represents one of the most significant threats to civil liberties, privacy, and democratic traditions in U.S. history. The Act, in its current form, gives sweeping search and surveillance to domestic law enforcement and foreign intelligence agencies and eliminates the checks and balances which had been the difference between the free world and the suppressed. That difference previously had given the courts the opportunity to ensure that those powers were not abused. Patriot and follow-up legislation now in development threatens the basic rights of millions of Americans and has turned America into a suppressed state. A new bill introduced in this 110th Congress is designated to extend the U.S. Patriot Act, allowing what many experts say are illegal provisions, which will continue to allow the FBI, DEA, ICE, ATF, U.S. military, and other federal agencies like the Drug Task Force to spy on investigative and arrest innocent Americans. The law, because of the Act, allows for violations of American Constitution rights that our forefathers did not intend. The constitutional lawyers all across America say the Patriot Act should be repealed, not reinstated. President Bush signed into law the early renewal of the controversial patriotic law on December the 30th, 2005. As the provisions were due to expire, they were extended with Public Law 109 through 160. That pushed the date from December 31st, 2005 until February 3rd, 2006. The date of expiration was again changed from February 3rd, 2006 until March 10th, 2006. The original Patriot Act was passed into law on October the 24th, 2001 by Congress of the United States, just 45 days after the September 11th attacks, with few congressmen even reading it and virtually no debate. There are significant flaws in this Patriot Act, flaws that threaten your fundamental freedoms by giving the government the right and the power to access your medical records, tax records, information about books you buy or borrow without probable cause. And even worse, the power to break your door down at home at any time, day or night, and conduct unconstitutional searches and seizures. Or if you're lucky and are not home, they can search your home or business in secret without telling you for weeks, months, or indefinitely. According to Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, the law dramatically expands the ability of states and the federal government to conduct surveillance of American citizens. The government can monitor an individual's web surfing records, use roving wiretaps to monitor phone calls made by individuals, proximate to the primary person being tapped, access internet service provider records, and monitor the private records of people involved in legitimate protest. Patriot is not limited to terrorism, EFF writes on their website. They point out that the government can add samples to DNA databases for individuals convicted of any crime. Government spying on suspected computer trespassers, not just terrorist suspects. And all of this more requires no court order. Wiretaps are now allowed for any suspected violation of Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, offering possibilities for government spying on and monitoring any computers used for searches, emails, and in fact, record every stroke on any computer. Foreign and domestic intelligence agencies can be more easily spying on Americans. Powers under the existing Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, have been broadened to allow increased surveillance opportunities. FISA standards are lower than any constitutional standard applied by the courts in regular investigations. Patriot partially repeals legislation enacted in the 1970s that prohibited pervasive surveillance of Americans. Patriot eliminates government accountability. While Patriot freely eliminates privacy rights for individual Americans, it creates more secrecy for government activities, making it extremely difficult to know about the actions of the government or what they are taking them for. Patriot authorizes the use of sneak and peek search warrants in connection with any federal crime, including misdemeanors. A sneak and peek warrant authorizes the law enforcement officers to enter private premise without the occupant's permission or knowledge, and without information the occupant that such a search was conducted. The Department of Justice, with little input from Congress and the American people, is developing follow-on legislation. The Domestic Security Enhancement Act, nicknamed the Patriot 2, would greatly expand the Patriot's already sweeping powers. The federal government has turned American freedoms into a worldwide mockery with their unchecking spyware and on ordinary Americans. Part of the broad pattern of the executive branch using national security and or suspected terrorism is an excuse for encroaching on the privacy and free speech rights of Americans without adequate oversight. It eliminates many protections against unlawful imprisonment, and now many rights in U.S. legal systems are absent, such as the important rights of habeas corpus. As written in the Act, violates due process for all Americans. All the president has to do is call a citizen an enemy combatant, and the person's due process rights disappear. The U.S. government says that U.S. citizens can be detained and then tried in secret trials in absentia and can use secret evidence that the accused cannot see or challenge. If evidence is obtained by coercion or torture, government lawyers contend that it should be allowed as a basis for conviction. They are erasing 300 years of Anglo-American jurisprudence. You should be very comfortable with the collection of your records by the government, which are using the Patriot Act to demand your Social Security number and other private, financial, or medical information by order of a secret court, and the muzzling of those citizens who receive such orders from publicly speaking about them. This is a violation of both the First and Fourth Amendment. You should also oppose the collection of both private and business records by banks, pharmacies, and other businesses which are using the Patriot Act to demand your Social Security number and other private financial or medical information. Criticism of former President Bush's admission that he had received warnings only weeks before September 11th has made it more important to understand the origins of the act. There has never been a more urgent need to preserve fundamental privacy protection in our system of checks and balances than the need we face today as illegal government spying provisions of the Patriot Act and government-sponsored torture programs transcend the bounds of law and our most treasured values in the name of national security. And just the allegations of suspected terrorist activity, be it true or not. The current act that was extended and updated, you can read online at the site www.epic.org. Financial transactions. The sections of the Patriot Act that deal with the financial transactions fall under Title III, which is also known as the International Money Laundering Abatement and Financial Anti-Terrorism Act of 2001. It stands on its own as a separate act of Congress as well as being part of the Patriot Act. It is an amended version of the 1986 Money Laundering Control Act and the 1970 Bank Secrecy Act. The earlier acts tended to focus on preventing money laundering and international cash flow as it relates to the drug trade or gambling, smuggling, and other types of criminal activity. If the 2001 version of the focus has shifted towards money laundering as a means of financial international terrorism, the current act encourages financial institutions to collect certain data to identify customers and their transactions in case any of the activity should be flagged as suspicious by a government agency. Suspicious, in most cases, means involving any foreign nationals or corporations. The Patriot Act considers any such account or transactions worthy of intense scrutiny, although the scrutiny will, of course, be more severe for certain nationalities than for others. What if you are born U.S. citizens, do not have any arrest record, and are not involved in any type of criminal activity? If you just like to open a bank account or engage in another banking transaction, can a bank force you to provide your Social Security number? How about fingerprinting? Is either of these strictly required by law? Not exactly. Although if you do not wish to provide your Social Security number, you will have to obtain an alternate taxpayer identification number. This information, along with your name, address, and date of birth, is used as part of the Required Customer Identification Program, CIP, used to verify customer identity and to compare customer information with lists of known terrorist suspects. Such information may be also required by other money service businesses, such as current exchanges, all having the effect of the financial institution acting as agent to and for the U.S. government. Fingerprints are not requirements of the Patriot Act, and they certainly are not required by all financial institutions. So if your bank insists on this procedure, you may wish to take your business somewhere else. Cash transactions are certainly not prohibited, but they bring more government scrutiny, and they are now more inconvenient for certain vendors to process. If you deposit, withdraw, or make a purchase involving more than $10,000 in cash in one day, the other agency involved has to file a currency transaction report. With this, the IRS that reports details such as your name, address, taxpayer identification number. If you purchase over $3,000 of traveler's checks, money orders, or cashier's checks, such as transactions, will be reported to the IRS via Monetary Instrument Log, MIL. And should you engage in any activity that indicates you may be engaged in money laundering or otherwise violating the law, your transaction may even trigger your being put on the no-fly list and on the suspicious activity report as well. The SAR will be filed without your knowledge. It is, in fact, against the law for you to be informed of the SAR, as your knowledge would compromise the subsequent investigation. If you want to repeat the Patriot Act to be repealed, you should immediately write your congressman and express your concerns. If you and millions of others don't, America's leadership and freedom and many of our own basic freedoms and liberties will be a thing of the